Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton, and of course, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper.
Oh, Matt, top of the afternoon, eat whatever it is.
I guess it's evening. It's 6 p.m.
Whatever. What's a top? Why is it called the top when it's the beginning?
They-
Because top of the morning means
They do that in radio a lot, too. Like, they'll say the top of the hour, the bottom of the hour.
top of the hour. You would think of the I guess the bottom of the hour would be the beginning.
Well, it depends if you're going up or down, I guess.
Yeah, that's all confusing to me.
It is.
Scotty, calm down.
He's confusing you.
Yeah, I know he is. Tonight our guest is Sheriff Hardy. He's the running for re-election as our sheriff in Hillsborough County. And our further guest is my favorite 6-year-old grandson. Sit up, please.
Are you talking to me or Scott?
Scott. I said favorite. So,
Oh, okay, very good. I
You're
got
probably
you.
not his favorite grandson.
no,
that's true.
nothing
That's true.
personal, nothing personal.
All I heard was sit up. I say, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, sir. So anyway, Scotty was with me yesterday. We had last year about this time we had the director of Fish and Game on. We talked about the gentleman. I was going to say gentleman, but it's kind of a loose use of the term. Who sued the landowner in Candy, I think it was, and sued him for being on his property, and he fell from a tree on the guy's property and blamed the landowner for having a faulty tree stand. And so anyway, the fact of the matter is the court case was resolved, but that landowner was still liable for $5,000 or $10,000 worth of legal fees because of a frivolous lawsuit. So Representative Gene Chandler basically carried most of the water on it, but I was co-sponsor of a bill that made that if a similar lawsuit was brought today, that person who filed the suit would be liable for the lawyer fees for the landowner. So we shouldn't see any kind of lawsuit like that. Anyway,
Right.
the governor had a public signing of that yesterday, and Scott Anthony Sanborn, my grandson, was with me. So I have a picture of him. The governor this is actually the governor's idea. The governor says, "Hey, can I get a picture, or do you want me to get a picture of you, me with your grandson?" I said, "Sure." See, there it is.
Oh, very nice.
Very
Scott
nice.
Anthony Sanborn with Governor Lynch, who was a very nice guy. Thank you.
Your grandson makes the governor look tall in that photo.
Yes, that helps. Yes, it was very
Well,
helpful.
the governor's always great with the kids, too.
Is he?
Yeah, he's excellent with
That's
the
good.
kids and the tour groups, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is a nice guy. I mean, I think that's one thing I try to bring out in this show, that just because I'm a Republican and I'm conservative doesn't mean I hate Democrats.
Right.
You can't really be. You got to work with people. You can't be hating them just because you disagree with them. You try to convince them. You don't try to
Exactly.
beat them with a stick.
Very important to maintain a civil tone when you're exploring one's views,
Yeah.
and particularly different views and things. It's civility is very important, and unfortunately today in a lot of circumstances, whether it's public discourse on politics or government or society in general, sometimes that's lacking. So it's good you adopt that philosophy, Gary.
Certainly in Washington, you don't see that anymore. That just seems to be long gone.
Yeah, unfortunately that's true.
It
So-
seems to, but the thing is what people see in the paper and what's reality are two different things. Like, you'll hear people yelling at each other, and then they'll go out to coffee after the cameras are gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Yeah.
know how much of that. I know that the last 2 years have been more confrontational than I've seen it in the years I've been up in the legislature.
Yeah, I really think that people expect the debates and the discussions to be vigorous and to be spirited, but be with a healthy dose of civility.
Yeah.
I think that's what most people want. So hopefully those that don't engage in that type of discussion and debate will take notice and adjust their conduct.
You would think so.
Yeah, you would hope so.
So, speaking of civility in the federal, what was it? This is so ridiculous. It was Biden. Was it yesterday or today?
Oh, the chains comment?
Yeah. Well, that was part of the comment. Joe Biden got up on, and I guess it was in front of a predominantly black audience, and said that if if Romney gets reelected, he will unfetter Wall Street and put chains back. Will put the chains back on you people. I think was roughly what he said.
Mm-hmm.
But the sentence he said before that, I don't understand why that is not more focused on, because it was so condescending, because he, you know, he's speaking in front of a predominantly black audience. All of a sudden he changes his language. You know, he said,
Yeah, I haven't seen that
it's going to
clip
be
yet,
on
so.
y'all or something like that.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was
Huh.
it was quite deliberate, and it was trying to appease to something. It was just
Huh.
it was so condescending. I don't understand how he gets away with it.
Right.
Like you say, that's a lot of the stuff that's going on in D.C.
He's
to
regarded. I think he's kind of the people think of him as kind of the crazy uncle who, you know, he's kind of a
Yeah, but
loose
he's the
cannon.
vice president of the United States.
Oh, agreed.
If
I
Obama
don't-
dies, he's it.
Right. Right.
So
I know.
he might be the crazy uncle, but he's the crazy uncle who could be in charge of the United States of America.
Very true. Very true.
Anyway, but the discourse is, some of the stuff on the national level is so over the top.
Yeah.
Anyway, one reason I had the guy who's running against you
Yep.
on, was that last week or the week before? I lost track.
This is a week before.
The week before.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, like I told him, is every 2 years people go to the polls and vote for a series of candidates. One of them is sheriff of Hillsborough County, if you live in Hillsborough County, obviously. And I don't think most people even know what it is.
Yep.
You know, they picture sheriff, and you didn't come up with a cowboy hat and a six-gun, so
Not tonight.
not tonight.
Yeah, I learned a lot when I was Hardy. Jim Hardy, was that his name?
No, he's Jim
He's Jim
Hardy.
Hardy. Who was it? I'm sorry. Oh, Zabo.
Zabo.
However you say his name.
Yeah.
When he came on, I'm assuming we're going to learn a lot from Jim Hardy as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I
Now,
meant.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
your predecessor was Morris.
Walt Morse.
Walt Morris, right?
He, Sheriff Walt Morse, who has chaired my reelection campaigns since I took over for him in 2003. I'm very proud to have Walt's support. He's very well respected member of New Hampshire's law enforcement community and a true skinflint when it comes to budget expenditures. Also, I've tried to mirror his conduct in that regard. But Walt was the 27th sheriff of Hillsborough County, and I am the 28th sheriff of Hillsborough County. And I recognize, fellas, as sheriff, that I have to go out and earn re-election every 2 years,
Right.
and I have to account not only for the operations of the agency, but also for the budget expenditures. Just a quick overview of what the agency does. That's a very good question, because a lot of people think that we run the jails in New Hampshire, and the last sheriff in New Hampshire that actually did a corrections function was the late Sheriff John Morton in Coos County. We haven't run the jails in this county since 1978. There's a
On that note, just to not
Sure.
sidetrack you too
That's
much,
okay.
Who is in charge of Valley Street?
That's a great question. Valley Street, commonly known as Valley Street, the Hillsborough County Department of Corrections, is run by a jail superintendent appointed by the 3 county commissioners, and they're elected by district. Our commissioner here in Manchester is Commissioner Tony Pappas, who's also running for re-election. She's been excellent to work with. She covers Manchester, Bedford, and with the redistricting, she'll also have the town of New Boston in her district. The jail's run by David Dion, who was appointed last year upon the retirement of Jim O'Mara, who had been jail superintendent for about 20 years. But our duties as county sheriffs in this state, there are 10 sheriffs in the state, 10 counties, are very similar to the duties of the United States Marshal Service. But we do have some separate and distinct functions. One of our primary responsibilities is fugitive apprehension, similar to the U.S. Marshal. Anytime someone does not appear in Superior Court, and we have 2 Superior Court operations in this county, with the population, we have almost 400,000 residents approximately in this county, that anytime a felony level offender fails to appear in Superior Court, it's our responsibility as sheriff to bring them back in front of the court. That requires tracking them, investigating their whereabouts, apprehending them, and then putting them in the care and custody of Superintendent Dion and his staff until they appear in front of the court.
So that's not something the state police tend to do.
They certainly assist with it, but it's our primary obligation by
Okay.
statute. And we work very well with the other law enforcement agencies in New Hampshire, the state police, as well as the local police departments, including the here in this community, the Manchester Police Department. One of our other responsibilities is on the civil side of the law. Now, that can run the gamut anywhere from a small claim complaint someone hasn't paid a bill, and the judge wants them in court to figure out how they're going to pay it, assuming that he fines for the person the money's owed to, all the way to stalking orders, child custody orders, domestic violence orders, all those issues that come out of the family court, out of a person's household, that can, all those emotional issues that can trigger violence. So my view as sheriff is, and I didn't invent this concept, but my view as sheriff, frankly, is that a neutral, trained, professional presence inside a person's home when they're having these domestic issues keeps the peace and minimizes the risk of violence. And I'm very proud of our record there. I do know that all you can do is minimize the risk and not eliminate it. But you think about some of this on this particular civil side of the operation, our responsibilities. You deal with the most negative, intimate details of a person's life. A person wouldn't want their spouse or significant other to know. You're having financial problems, we're involved. Pursuant to a court order, you're being evicted from your home, we're involved. You're losing custody of your children, we're involved. You're getting divorced, we're involved. All those issues that result in violence. So I'm very proud of the men and women that I lead and direct and guide as sheriff. I think they do a phenomenal job. Last year, for example, just to give you a quick stat, we served over 27,000 pieces of civil process, and that particular function, there is offsetting revenue that's set by statute, and I know, Representative, that you know that. Well, I was just reading your T-shirt, so I just assumed that you knew,
No, I don't. False advertising.
With fame does not come knowledge.
Okay,
necessarily,
all right.
yeah.
Well taken. One of our other primary responsibilities quickly is, we do not run the correctional facility. Anytime they're outside the secure confines of that correctional facility for a court appearance, we're responsible for transporting them, maintaining temporary custody of them.
Those are the vans we see going around.
That's correct, primarily the vans. Last fiscal year, we moved almost 19,000 prisoners between the correctional facilities in the state and the courthouses in Hillsborough County. A staggering number, and for the most part done safely.
Maybe if they didn't drink so much, there wouldn't be such a staggering number.
Well, those type of offenses are more apt to be found in the circuit court, frankly, formerly known as the district court.
Okay.
That segues in very nicely into one of our other responsibilities, which is policing the courts. We do every aspect of security in the Superior Court, including the perimeter security, the courtroom security, as well as the custody and control of the prisoners. In the circuit courts, formerly known as the district courts, violation and misdemeanor level offenses, we do the custody and control function, and the state judicial branch mans the perimeter and the courtroom security with court officers. One of the other functions that we do upon request is we do directed police patrols. Each and every one of our deputy sheriffs, whether they're part-time or full-time, have got police officer certification from the New Hampshire Police Standards and Training Council. They basically have got to successfully complete a 16-week program at the New Hampshire Police Academy to function as a full-time or part-time deputy sheriff. Whether you're a New Hampshire State Trooper, a county deputy sheriff, or a local police officer, you have got to have that credential to work as a police officer. And I respectfully take the opportunity to point out I'm the only candidate for sheriff in the primary that has that same minimum credential. I successfully completed the police academy in 1980. And I've been a certified police officer ever since. I think it's important that one that wishes to lead and manage and guide and direct the men and women of the Sheriff's Office have that same minimum credential as an entry-level
Were
employee.
you in the service also?
I was not. I graduated from high school in 1976, and I was fortunate enough to be in that notch right after the Vietnam era, where
they weren't really drafting, but you still had to register for the draft.
actually I was in that year, Gary, where I didn't have to register, and I always respect and appreciate and thank those that did serve, but I was in that particular age group in that
Yeah,
particular
yeah.
time when I didn't serve.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit too about these. One of the other things we do real quick is we run a 24-hour communication center. We dispatch for approximately 12 communities in the county on a Some of those communities we dispatch 24/7. Some of those we dispatch a portion of the time.
What does that mean?
Well, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we provide emergency communication services for their
like
police
another-
departments.
like for-
Dispatching,
For some of the smaller towns? that don't
correct.
have- Okay.
That's
okay.
correct. And they pay a fee for that service based on a call volume. Most of these communities have lower call volumes. So in addition to covering our own operations, we do dispatch for about 12 towns. Now, my focus as sheriff has been, here in 2012, when the country's still in the midst of a recession, has been and will continue to be focused on managing and oversight of the budgets. And it was pointed out to me at a forum several days ago that, well, budget management should be a fairly simple thing, but I can tell you, gentlemen, that when you're managing a budget for an emergency service, such as the Office of the Sheriff, that it's not a simple thing, that budget has to be managed hourly, daily, and weekly to ensure that the money that's appropriated in June, that the fiscal year begins July 1st, that lasts till the following June 30th.
Right.
And I'll tell you that I'm very proud of our efforts, but my direction to the command staff of our agency is that we will schedule shifts accordingly, so we minimize the overtime. So one group may be coming in at 8 in the morning, one group may be coming in at 7, one group may be coming in at 6. We stagger the shifts, it minimizes the overtime. And certainly if overtime is necessary, we expend it. I do want to point out when emergencies occur, whether it's a critical incident or weather-related emergency, that we are there to provide assistance to our brother and sisters in New Hampshire law enforcement. Some may remember the ice storm several years ago. Well, power was knocked out
yeah,
for,
yeah.
in some areas, 2 or 3
Made for
weeks.
some really
Yeah.
pretty pictures of
It made for some, it certainly did.
That's true.
That's a positive observation of a very bad situation,
yeah.
Gary. It certainly did make some great pictures. I can remember specifically some very nice ice hanging off some trees in the community of Hollis
Yeah.
down on the Pepperell line. However, it puts people in danger, and particularly with the elderly and things like that. So we were there to provide some assistance to not only the state police but the local police agencies. If it's a critical incident, certainly the tragedy on the Seacoast in April involving the fatal wounding of.
Involved in that.
Well,
also, right?
our involvement comes when, frankly, when there is an emergency, that's an all-hands-on-deck type of call. Now, when Chief Maloney was shot and fatally wounded, and the officers of the Drug Task Force were shot and seriously wounded, we provided, without a lot of fanfare and without a lot of fanfare or a lot of ceremony. I happened to be in Nashville that night. I went home. I suited up. I put my uniform on, and we just covered some of the patrols in the Troop B area of the state for the state police. While their focus, rightfully so, was down on the events on the Seacoast. I immediately made contact with Rockingham County Sheriff Mike Downing, and offered and provided some assistance to his agency while he was providing assistance to the Greenland Police Department. Now, I only say that so that the folks out there understand that there's a lot more to the job of the sheriff than serving papers and moving prisoners. We do have a force of state-certified police officers.
How much?
Now,
Well, you said a force. What numbers are we talking
we
about?
have approximately 24 full-time sworn personnel, and when you think of some of those stats I gave earlier that we do, there's a lot of work that's accomplished with a small amount. I have a force of approximately 20 part-time deputy sheriffs that we bring in as needed to backfill. It's a cost-effective way to backfill on agency needs with part-time help. I'm very fortunate to have a good crew there. We have 5 in the communications center, and we backfill there with part-time assistants. While I'm on it, before I forget, I want to talk about the stats on the warrants a little bit. That's something people are always interested in. Last year, we cleared 1,965 warrants here in Hillsborough County, of which 613 were felony-level warrants. 346 were marital warrants, which is primarily child support obligations, as well as 1,006 civil bench warrants that are cleared. So we cleared last year 1,965 warrants. It's a staggering number, but a good number, because that's folks that were on the loose that we've apprehended, and I'm very proud of that. As-
We got a phone call or?
We have someone on hold? Bob? Okay. Hi, Bob. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades.
Bob?
Bob?
Yeah.
Hi, Bob. Welcome to the show. What you got?
Hey, I just want to say hi to Jimmy Hardy. This is Bob Perry, Jim.
Bob,
I grew up with him. I went to school from first grade to high school.
you grew up on Hobbs Road in Pelham.
I think he's a hell of a nice guy.
Thank you, Bob.
I,
Bob, I told you to call at 6:30, though. Called a little early tonight. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. He's another Pelham boy.
There's a time delay. If he's listening to the TV show and listening to you, there's a 3-second
Okay.
delay. It screws him up.
I'll get
That's
the
exactly.
I'll get the hang of this 2 days after the election, I think, you know.
Good, good.
So, Bob, it's great to hear your voice, and I appreciate the call. Another Pelham boy on the loose.
No, his mom was a dispatcher at the Pelham Police Department. Jimmy's always been involved in Pelham. He was a police officer. As a matter of fact, he won an award. Remember, Jimmy? I forget what it was, but it was a shootout. I think on Sherburne Road, somewhere up there. You know, everybody respects it in Pelham. I know I do.
Now, Bob, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If his mom was a dispatcher, is it possible that you guys grew up together and she got you off on something and this is like...
No, Mrs. Hardy was, you know what, she was the type of person that would put you in line. You know, if she saw you jaywalking, she'd make sure you didn't do that again.
She'll run you over, right?
You know?
I can attest to being put into line more than once growing up with my mother, who was the de facto deputy police chief in Pelham, although they never gave her the title.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so funny.
And Bob, I appreciate your kind words. The Perigny family in Pelham was very involved in the Legion for many years, and I appreciate that. I didn't realize we had live call-in tonight. I haven't done that since we did a candidates night for a state reps race in Pelham many years ago. So, but it's great to hear your voice, and that shootout you're referring to, I'm reminded by my late grandmother who always said, don't be the big I am, don't brag about yourself. But that case he's referring to was when I was a rookie police officer, and an armed robbery occurred in Hudson in the adjoining town, and there was 3 brothers from Billerica that had committed a series of armed robberies in the area, and long story short, I chased them down through Pelham into Dracut, into Lowell, and my cruiser got fired at several times, including one under the New Hampshire State Inspection sticker.
Wow.
We ended up, the chase ended in Lowell with the assistance of the Dracut and Lowell Police Department. That was many years ago. That was in 1980, I believe, in August. So 32 years ago. So a lot of times passed, Bob, and the bad guys went to jail. No one got seriously hurt in that pursuit, and I was glad the way it turned out, and they're not committing any more armed robberies.
That was thanks to you, Jimmy. You know what I mean? You didn't give up. I mean, you know, you stuck with your guns, and you did what you had to do, and you protected the people, you know.
Well, thank you.
We all appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and
Thanks for the call, Bob.
yeah.
All
I
right,
want
you
to
guys have a good night.
thank you,
Okay.
Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
I want to point out that I had assistance that evening
Did you buy
from.
him lunch or something?
Well, no, I didn't actually. I know you're probably going to think I did. He's several years older than I am. I'm not home as early as I used to be with the campaigning I do after work and stuff. But they're a good family, and I didn't realize you have call-ins here, so that's quite interesting. But I want to, but I want to point out that I don't mind that, and I want to point out that. I had assistance that night, not only from my colleagues on the Pelham Police Department, from the Dracut and Lowell Police Department too. So that was not anything that I did single-handedly and stuff.
Right.
So
Hey, I want to ask you because the other week when we had your opponent on, he spoke very highly of you, by the way, and I'm not trying to.
We've had a very civil campaign. I saw him Saturday at an event at St. Anselm's, and we're very cordial with each other. And look, I recognize that this is a public office. People have the right to run, and if I want to continue as sheriff, I have to earn re-election from the citizens. I get that. I understand that this is a public office, so I appreciate the fact.
What I was getting at wasn't that, because
Yeah.
he is a nice guy, but he's running on a platform of the premise that because sheriff is a constitutionally provided for office, which it is, it's in the state constitution,
That's right.
He even talked about it predating the Constitution.
predating, and it
Yeah.
did predate the Constitution, but his vision of it was to, if for instance, during the mortgage default swaps, we ended up with a lot of people who ended up with the titles got so confused by the end of the day that he felt as though, as sheriff, it was not his to protect the constitutional rights of the individual citizen. It was incumbent upon him as sheriff to not serve papers if the title could not be clearly proof of the title could not be shown. And I was just wondering, as on a practical matter, how much do you get involved in that, or do the courts say, hey, we need you to serve this, or how does that actually work?
Well, that's an excellent question, and look, I recognize that my opponent has very strong views on this, as
Yeah.
do others. My authority as sheriff, I am a constitutional officer. My authority originates, and most of it is within the statutes of New Hampshire and things like that, the New Hampshire law. My view is that I do not have unilateral sole authority to intervene in a dispute that, in my view, appropriately belongs, if the parties can't resolve it, in court. Now, certainly there's been some issues about mortgage fraud, not only in this state, but other areas around the country. I was very pleased to see at the Executive Council meeting last week that it was brought up, and the Attorney General is forming some type of investigative unit to look into some of these things. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that when it comes to these things, as it does with investigating crimes, one size does not fit all. Circumstances related to my mortgage may be completely different to circumstances related to you two gentlemen. So when we say clear title, is that my function as sheriff to establish clear title? My view is that belongs in court to be resolved by some regulatory agency. Now, I think if someone feels they've been the victim of mortgage fraud, that it should be reported, it should be investigated, and it should be reviewed. And certainly, that's not only my view, but that's the view of the other 9 sheriffs in the state. But I do not think that as sheriff that I have unilateral authority to decide who's got clear title and who doesn't, because you need some expertise in that. Now, what happens, for example, if you're talking about the term clear title, if I render a decision, assuming that my opponent's correct, and I respect, again, he's got strong views on it, that I establish clear title as sheriff, that I make a decision and one of the parties doesn't like it. Now what? You're probably going to be back in court where we probably should have been, frankly, in the first place. Now, as sheriff, I enforce lawful orders. There's a fancy word for it called precepts from the court. So if the court issues a judgment and directs the sheriff or his deputies, or her deputies, so far in New Hampshire it's his deputies, but it could be her deputies,
Yep.
Why,
Is your mom running against you?
what's that?
Mom running against you?
No, Mom passed away about 3 years ago,
Oh,
but,
okay.
I was probably
no, that's
thinking of
okay.
that show, She's the
Did
Sheriff.
you mean your mother, Gary, or my mother? I just, look, the bottom line is, I enforce lawful orders, and if the court issues an order, a lawful order, then I will do everything in my authority to enforce it. And I understand that people have been victimized by mortgage fraud, and I do think that should be investigated and looked at. But I think every circumstance and every case is going to have a different set of facts and a different set of conclusions. And look, reasonable people can disagree on views and opinions and conclusions. But I do not think as sheriff that I have that unilateral authority on my own to make decisions on what clear title consists of. And certainly if someone feels they've been the victim of the crime, report it to the appropriate agency, and it'll be reviewed.
If you went that next step and started reviewing title, would you almost be a second judiciary.
Well, I
Right?
think you
You'd
could.
have to investigate it and you'd have to have legal people come in and say, well, this is,
I think the right way to go, and I think the executive council was on the right track last week at the state level. The right way to go is get those that have the expertise, because title searches are a whole specialty.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't go to a medical doctor for an emergency appendectomy with a guy that does orthopedic surgery. So my view is it's appropriate to have it under the Attorney General's office. They're forming up some type of investigative unit. In the meantime, if someone feels they've been the victim of a crime or a fraudulent act, then that can certainly be reviewed by a law enforcement agency to see. I recognize with some out there in the population, I respect the fact that it's become a hot button issue, but I also understand that my focus, in my view, rightfully so, is on leading, guiding, and directing and controlling the workforce, getting the essential functions done of the office, and making sure that we manage that budget so the money lasts and we can perform the essential functions. Because, look, I really frankly think that is one of my key responsibilities here, particularly when the country and the state are in a severe recession. Now, I know in my heart that better days are coming.
Yep.
But I also know that there isn't a lot of sign of better days coming right now, and I recognize there's a lot of angst out there in people's households and people's families. How does that relate to the office of the sheriff? Again, all those emotional triggers that can result in violence. And by the way, this can happen in the courthouses. I'm very proud of the men and women, and I didn't mention too much earlier, I'll take the opportunity now, that police those courthouses under my authority. They do a great job. And they don't all have a law enforcement background, but they have the training and they have the skill set and the experience to handle a lot of volatile situations in those courts. That's where these issues belong if two parties can't agree. A courtroom, hash it out. A judge, an impartial judge or a jury will issue an order, and if it's a lawful order, it'll be enforced. And that's where I am on that. There's a system in place now. Now, that's my view on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ever in a situation, and not necessarily with a mortgage situation, but are you ever in a situation where you're given an order to carry out that you determine is unlawful?
I have not had that experience. It's not to say it couldn't occur.
Sure.
But there's a lot of checks and balances in New Hampshire, and the judges have to go through a confirmation process by other elected officials. The executive councilors have to confirm. The governor can't just place a nominee on a bench. 3 councilors have to agree with the governor's nomination. There are certainly codes of professional conduct out there. Now, again, reasonable people can disagree about whether someone's a good sheriff or a poor sheriff or a good judge or a bad judge or a great state representative or a bad state representative.
Whoa, you're getting real personal.
Reasonable people can. I wasn't looking at you, Gary. But reasonable people. You guys should be over at the comedy club, But reasonable people can disagree about things like that. That gets very subjective. But there is a lot of checks and balances in New Hampshire, and frankly, I think if something was out of line, there'd be an outcry. I can tell you that I've got a record of making tough decisions, whether it's on budget issues or whether it's on operations issues. Look, when you're directing a law enforcement agency, you cannot take the path of least resistance and say yes all the time. So I have no problem with saying no if it's necessary, making course corrections if it's necessary. My expectation of our staff, of deputy sheriffs, as well as the administrative support staff that man the offices, as well as the court offices and the dispatches, is that everyone will be treated with respect and dignity until their conduct determines otherwise. And then if we have to utilize force, that's all covered by statute. You're only allowed to use whatever level of force is necessary to neutralize a situation and to bring a situation under control and restore order. And that sounds like a slogan for the wall, but we live by that. And the men and women that are out there in their patrol areas for my office as sheriff understand that everyone, Doesn't matter whether they have $1 in their pocket or they've got $1 million in their pocket. Everyone will be treated with respect and dignity, including those that are incarcerated. I've always found that the compliance level stays up with folks, and as long as you treat them respectfully, in most circumstances.
Right.
Certainly if someone's intoxicated or someone's agitated. The other thing I found after 33 years in New Hampshire law enforcement, be an active listener. And I got to tell you, when you're a 21 or 22-year-old police officer, recently out of the police academy, your view is you're going to solve all the situations just like on television.
Right.
With in about 22 minutes with 8 minutes for commercials.
Yeah.
You recognize with you recognize with experience it doesn't work like that. But I expect that in this in our area of responsibility, that's how people will be treated, and that doesn't happen by accident. My command staff knows. I've got an excellent staff. I'm proud to lead them, but they understand what my expectation is. So I recognize, getting back to the original question on these issues, that people have strong views on them, but my focus is on the agency operations and on the management of the budget. If somebody feels they've been victimized, certainly report it to an appropriate agency so it can be looked at and reviewed.
Right. Well, I just see, I had a, because I went from that asked him on the next level, which was, because I knew he had kind of, like he said, he was Republican with a small L, you know, libertarian leanings. I said, so, and this is where I kind of got kind of fuzzy, is because I asked him, I said, well, what if the state police were, because you get involved sometimes as support, I would say, at a minimum, with, say, a drug bust.
Absolutely.
Right. And I said, if it was they knew somebody was going to, or was being arrested for marijuana, your libertarian side would not agree with that. What are you going to do? And he said, well, I'd have to defend the citizen because it's really unconstitutional.
Well,
And so wouldn't you, if you were sheriff, would you be then in the position of deciding in Hillsborough County what is or isn't unconstitutional by your own opinion, rather than?
Let me be frank and say that it is not up to me as sheriff to decide what laws are constitutional and what laws are unconstitutional. There is a check and balance in place that the Founding Fathers put in. We were the 9th state to ratify the federal Constitution. Article 7 in the New Hampshire Constitution talks about state sovereignty, and certain things are ceded to the assigned, for lack of a better word, to the federal government.
Yep.
It's not up to me as sheriff to decide. That is up. Legislators pass laws. They're enacted. If someone feels they're improper, the appeal is through the court system. That system is tried and true. Imagine the anarchy that could potentially result if I decide as sheriff I'm not going to enforce statutes that you in the citizens' legislature have adopted and enacted. That's not my role. I'm a law enforcer, and it certainly isn't up to me to pick and choose what laws get enforced and which ones don't. Certainly, we have priorities based on budget constraints
right.
and on operations needs and things like that. But I am not. It's not my role as sheriff to decide what's constitutional and unconstitutional. I will tell you, without giving you a lot of operational detail, and probably not give you any at all, we do have a deputy assigned to the drug task force. And last year, in calendar year 11, there were 67 arrests made. Now, this is not street-level narcotics activity. This is mid-level. We worked this in conjunction with the State Drug Task Force and the Drug Enforcement Administration. Last year, 26 kilos of cocaine was seized. This is in southern New Hampshire. Okay, people think, oh, this must be down in Boston, or this must be down in Lawrence or Lowell. This is southern.
Did that even make the paper?
Some of it does not make the paper. It's all gone through the court system. Some of it doesn't make the paper, not because anyone's trying to be secretive, but because investigations continue. Because the goal, of course, is
Scotty, would you move over there, please?
the goal, of course, is to continue the investigations and get to the source and things like that. Mm-hmm. But let me just run down these real quick because this is important. These guys and gals are out there doing good work. 626 grams of crack cocaine. I mentioned the 26 kilos of cocaine, 7 grams of hashish, 20 grams of heroin, 22.5 kilos of marijuana, 225 hydrotonic marijuana plants, 1,810 grams of crystal methamphetamine, which is a particularly nasty synthetically manufactured drug. Does a real job on people. Some people only take it once and never recover. 1,908 oxycodone pills, which is in 2012 is seriously abused. That's a seriously abused prescription drug, and 99 hydrocodone pills. Now, those are all narcotics that were seized in 2011 by this drug task force that won't be out there tempting our youngsters and teenagers and things like that. Now, did it make a dent in it? We hope it did. But again, this is that cooperation that occurs in New Hampshire law enforcement that some people disparage, but I frankly wear as a badge of honor, because
Right.
not only our work with the Drug Enforcement Administration resulted in that, but also our efforts for the United States Marshal Service. We have detectives out there tonight as we speak, out there looking for violent felons that have skipped Superior Court. So these are good things that are going on. And we live in a state where if there's any abuse from the federal government, I asked someone last week, where is this abuse you're talking about? And they couldn't cite a case in New Hampshire because there'd be an uproar up here. They cite cases in other states that frankly I'm not familiar with. Some folks get very animated about it. I'm certainly not dismissing it, but I will tell you that in this state that there would be an uproar if that occurred. Certainly if things come up between law enforcement agencies, I have no hesitation in picking up the phone and calling the colonel at state police headquarters or calling one of the police chiefs, and they know they can call me. We got somebody that's out of line. There's a process in there with the standard operating procedures and the rules and regulations. Someone's got a complaint against our personnel. It's handled professionally. It's looked at, and it's dealt with. And if corrective action needs to be taken, it's taken. But I'm very proud of the work these folks have done. So I don't pick and choose as sheriff which laws I feel I can enforce and which ones I don't. I don't think that's appropriate for a law enforcement officer to do, frankly.
He kind of presented it. In fact, I think this was his exact words. As sheriff, he would be the CEO. Is that how he put it, of the county? So therefore, you know, he
Yeah.
kind of almost like he's independent of everything. That was
Well,
kind of how he presented it.
Again, my authority as sheriff primarily is based in the statutory authority I'm given.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that the voters in this county have a tradition of giving priority to candidates with law enforcement experience when they elect a sheriff. And again, I'm only the 28th sheriff in this county. We've had 44 presidents, and we've had 44 presidents in this country, but only 28 sheriffs in Hillsborough County. And I can
You live
tell.
longer than President.
Well, hopefully, I don't know. I don't know. I think what happens is, and if you look at the history of it, some of these gentlemen stayed in office for a long time. Now, when the age restriction was put in that judges have to retire at 70 years old, that was probably put in at least 25 years ago. The same restriction was put on sheriffs.
Really?
So I assure you, I will not be running for county sheriff when I'm 68 years old. But I will tell you that the voters in this county have a history of giving priority to those candidates with law enforcement experience. And I am the only candidate in the primary with law enforcement experience. I respectfully say, in the most non-disparaging way I can, that my primary opponent has no law enforcement experience.
Okay.
And
Yeah, he admitted that on the show.
yeah,
He-
and look, I'm not, again, I don't mean that in a disparaging way.
Right.
But that's a fact. And I don't think that the aldermen in the city of Manchester would hire a police chief without any law enforcement experience. So I think if you look at the history of the voters in Hillsborough County, they've chosen candidates with law enforcement experience. Now, when it comes to the general election, should I be fortunate enough to earn the nomination of my party in the primary September 11th, I'm the only candidate in the general election that's got management experience with managing almost $4 million in operating budgets, as well as providing that leadership and guidance and making those tough decisions that have to be made when you're operating a public sector agency and maintaining the essential functions in tough economic times.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. And, we're getting by with less. We're getting by with less budget dollars. We're still performing the essential functions. Have we had to restructure? Have we had to be creative in scheduling? Of course we have. But I think that as a taxpayer in this
You guys
county,
all driving Priuses now?
that's, no, we're driving what we need to be driving to perform the functions of the office, whether it's a van or whether it's a Impala. We have one hybrid in the fleet, actually.
You do?
We do. We have a small SUV hybrid that we utilize, and I can tell you that we're very particular about that, too. And as should be, as you know, as a member of the county delegation, that there's a lot of scrutiny that goes with these budgets. They're not just rubber stamped. I review our budget requests before they leave my office. That's review number one as the elected official. And I can tell you that I turned down some of the requests from our staff for budget items. The second step is the Board of County Commissioners. The third step is a subcommittee of 9 legislators. The fourth step is a 21-person budget committee, de facto budget committee, called the Executive Committee. And the fifth and final step of the process is the full 123-member Hillsborough County delegation, those state representatives elected from Hillsborough County that approve or disapprove budget requests. So there is a lot of scrutiny. But after the appropriation's made and the budget's in effect, it's incumbent on us as elected officials to make sure that we control spending. We only spend whatever's necessary, and I've got a record of doing that, and I've got a record of making tough decisions on that.
Yeah, but now I would like to harken back to Sheriff Morse admitted to me, I think it was after the statute of limitations, though, that when he was in school with Judge David Souter, he took David Souter because he used David Souter was a tiny guy and dumped him on his head back in school. Now I'm wondering if that's why David Souter made decisions like the Kelo decision. He just got dumped on his head by Sheriff Morris, and that do you think that one event changed the course of history?
Well, I don't have any specific knowledge of that, and Sheriff Morse is Sheriff Morse is a little bit older than I am, and I want to be very careful because I'm proud to have Sheriff Morse not only chairing my re-election campaign, but functioning as my fiscal agent. So I will tell you, I've got no specific knowledge of that, but feel free to invite Sheriff Morrison to describe the whole incident in detail to you.
Yeah, he was telling me about.
He's still around. He's on the Fish and Game Commission currently,
yeah.
and he loves that. And he's still very active in the state, and very active in Republican politics, and very active member of the community.
Yeah, he's still
And
got Morris's Sporting Goods up in.
he does. He's a great guy. I can still call him up for advice once in a while, and I take advantage of that. And Walt did a great job for 10 years, and you know, I've worked for 4 sheriffs actually, and I can tell you that my goal is to improve on what Sheriff Morse did when he left office in 2003. And at some point when I retire, I don't wish to retire this year. I hope I'm lucky enough to earn re-election from the citizens in the county. But I hope when someone eventually comes in after me, that they can improve on what I did. Now, 2 of the things that I did was this past term was regarding court offices. I established minimum credentials, minimum physical ability standards for court offices. Anyone that was currently on staff was grandfathered in, and I have anywhere between, in the pool of court offices, I have between 60 and 65 court offices. We don't use that number every day, but they're stipend positions with no benefits. But as of May 1st of 2009, anybody that wants to be a court officer under my command has got to pass a physical ability test. Why? Because we're responsible for custody and control of prisoners, and if you have to, I want that level of experience that people will respect, but I also want someone that's physically able to do the job if things get physical. And I don't want someone getting hurt because I don't have the guts to say, you're a good man or you're a good woman, but you no longer have the capabilities of doing these functions.
Right.
And we've been very respectful. The other thing I've done, and I've done it through scheduling, is and through labor negotiations. We have deputies out there now 7 days a week. Granted, the Saturday and Sunday schedule is thinner than the Monday through Friday schedule because of some of our specific duties and responsibilities. But I'm very proud of the fact now that we have coverage out there on Saturdays and Sundays, and on occasion during emergencies assisting some of the local police departments and things like that.
Yep.
So these are things that I've done without increasing the budget. And again, it's because of tough decisions. But, I'm proud to lead the men and women of the Office of the Sheriff, and it's a lot of responsibility, but I welcome the challenge. And I want to tell you two gentlemen, I'm grateful for the fact that you make time for the candidates to come on these shows, because speaking for myself, I run a very low-budget operation. I keep the political aspect of I keep the political aspects that I have to be involved in completely separate from the office, sometimes to my own detriment, but, I don't want my hands tied if I have to make decisions.
Sure.
Have to make tough decisions. So I keep the employees out of it, and I've done that for 10 years. I think that's the right way to do it. And I keep I keep the official function separate from that, from the political responsibilities I have.
Now, people might not know. It's probably a little bit boring for the audience, but it's probably important. Is where do the taxes come to pay for your office?
That's a great question. Each city and town is assessed a part of it when you get your property tax bill. Now in Pelham, it's twice a year. I know some communities are like that. Some people are annual. You'll see a town portion of the tax rate, a school portion of the tax rate, and then the county portion of the tax rate. And with that money, that funds the county corrections department, the operations at the county nursing home, the county sheriff's office, the county prosecutor. In Massachusetts, known as the district attorney. In this state, known as the county attorney.
Right.
They prosecute most cases in Superior Court, with the exception of homicide cases, which are handled by the Attorney General. County Attorney Dennis Hogan and his staff have a huge workload. We are the largest county in the state population-wise, and along with that, policing the two largest urban areas in the state, being Manchester and Nashua, along the Massachusetts border, 45 minutes from Boston. If you're in Nashua, 15 minutes from Lowell, 20 minutes from Lawrence, and all those associated issues that come with that. So we have a whole different host of challenges in the southern tier, along with Sheriff Downing in Rockingham, and to a lesser extent, perhaps Sheriff Elliott in Concord, than the sheriffs in the northern half of the state do.
Yeah, they
But
just
the
have to keep the Canucks out.
Well, that's,
Is that what you're thinking?
I want your viewers to note that was Gary's remark and not Jim Hardy's remark.
Gary's used to that kind of disclaimer following
Yeah,
a
it's
comment.
funny,
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably have. Yeah. But that's what happens. So those tax dollars, and my opponent pointed out at the at a cable TV show in Bedford that it was pennies on the tax dollar. Words to that effect. Hey, look, those pennies add up.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and I know myself that the disposable income I have in 2012 to go spend on fun stuff is nowhere near what it was in 2002.
No.
And look at people are hurting out there. Groceries are more expensive, gasoline's more expensive. So when someone says that, hey, look, that's just pennies on the tax dollar, those add up.
Right.
And I think as elected officials that we have an obligation to remember that. And that's how we treat the tax dollars.
Well,
We
that's-
sparingly.
So that's kind of why I wanted to tell you, because I think a lot of people get their tax bill and they say, taxes for Hillsborough County, and I don't think they equate it with the sheriff's department, or like
Correct.
you said, Dennis Hogan's, the county attorney.
That's
and
right.
The rest home and all the other stuff.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. And the jail, they've got a great record over there with custody and control, but they're dealing with violent offenders. They're dealing with a cross-section of society, all those people that are having problems in their lives, and a lot of it's drug-related. So you're dealing with people that are coming off, and we deal with them in the court, particularly in the circuit courts, people that are coming off drug and alcohol highs. Well, they're in custody because one of the police departments or our deputies on a directed police patrol or the state police have arrested them. Well, guess what? You've got to maintain custody of them, and you've got to keep them compliant, and it's a challenge. And an experienced veteran workforce helps get those duties done successfully. And I'm very proud of safely.
Safely is
Safely for the incarcerated individual too. After all, that's someone's fill in the blank: son, daughter, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. And look, we're not the judge and jury, so we want to make sure we get our job done. Make sure everybody goes home okay, and that's really the name of the game, in a cost-effective way.
But One thing you said was most of these incidents are drug or alcohol related, which is true. But if you look at the root issue, most of those people that are having problems with drugs and alcohol are also from single parent and broken homes. So the real key to lowering your budget is to have strong families in New Hampshire. Then we don't need the necessity for more police details and more people being arrested would decline.
Well, I'm a root cause kind of guy. I've never frankly done a lot of research on that. I know that I know there's a lot of discussion about that in the state. I know most people in New Hampshire have a libertarian view, a live and let live view about families and things like that. And I'm always glad when a child at risk or a teenager at risk gets some adult supervision.
Yep.
And no matter what form it comes in, some responsible adult supervision. And you know, there's a lot of social service agencies out there that are helping out with these things each and every day. There's a lot of poor souls out there that are having mental health issues, perhaps no fault of their own. Again, there's a lot of folks out there that aren't working. There's a lot of folks out there right now that are having financial problems that never had. And that's where a professional trained, state certified workforce comes in and really, in my case, in my view, minimizes the risk and really helps smooth things out.
Yep.
So
Well,
very.
we're out of time, Mr. Sheriff. Hey, Jim, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for
Yeah,
having me.
thanks
Much
for coming on.
appreciated.
Now,
And
you said that
I want to thank the folks at Manchester Community Television for manning the booth too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you said kids should have responsible adult supervision. That's why I don't understand why my daughter actually lets my grandson hang out with me at all.
What a fine young man too. He helped me out tremendously here this afternoon.
Hey, thank you very much. We'll see you next
Thanks,
week.
fellas.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.